I'm joined by Charles Shoebridge, a security analyst and former counter-terrorism intelligence officer. Hey, Charles. So once again, it seems this person was known to the intelligence services. That he was on a French intelligence base, it's been reported. If true, what sort of surveillance should he have been under not to escape through the cracks, as appears to have happened and carried out this attack last night in Paris?
Yes, you're right, and Issa's report is also correct that many, I would suspect actually the vast majority of those that have carried out attacks, not just in France, but elsewhere in Europe, including those in the UK in the last few years, have been known to the security services as a potential terrorist threat or security threat, as is being reported in this case. So on one level, that provides a modicum, a small amount of reassurance that at least these people were known to the security services. However, far less reassuring, of course, is the aspect that they were known, and yet, despite them being known as a potential terror threat, and of course, that level, that can be at different levels, that no surveillance was carried out on them.
So on a practical level, I suppose it's a kind of a sliding scale as to how dangerous the authorities think these people may be, the amount of surveillance they're under. But what does it mean practically? OK, so you're on a list, but what does it mean practically?
Well, there would undoubtedly, within different countries, here, as in here in the UK, there are different levels of surveillance that will be carried out. Some could be like a watching brief, in other words, occasional monitoring of the suspect in terms of physical surveillance, perhaps monitoring his phone calls, his internet access, and so on. But again, it largely depends upon in fact, entirely depends upon the decision-making process that has taken place. And here we've got to, again and again, we've got to look at the security services, and they will want to be looking at themselves to review the decision-making processes that they've actually undertaken, which came to, by which they've arrived at the decision that this person isn't worthy of surveillance. Quite clearly, as it happens last night, there was nobody more worthy of surveillance than, arguably at least, than this person. But that may have only just happened at that particular time, and particularly when we have a situation where there is a suspect, as in this case it would appear so far, is actually acting alone and not acting in any way that any preparation was needed. He's carried out an attack with a knife. He could have carried out an attack with a vehicle, for example. But if he'd carried out an attack with a homemade bomb, for example, where he's actually been collecting materials over some time to build a device, that might have given more of a clue away. We need to know more about this person, and I'm sure more will emerge in the next few days as to, before a judgment can be reached as to whether perhaps he should have been under more surveillance.
We hear year in, year out about the number of attacks that we never get to hear about. The foiled attacks that run into the hundreds in countries around the world. Can we look at this as what happened last night as a failure on the part of the French authorities, or do we just have to accept the general public that these things are going to happen now and again?
I think both can apply. Any terror attack getting through is in one way or another a failure of the intelligence services, because their primary aim is to prevent these attacks. But ironically, or not ironically, perhaps we should also see that, depending on the circumstances, it isn't possible. We have to accept that. It isn't possible to keep everybody under surveillance all of the time, and nor would anybody want that situation. But having said that, decision-making processes that have taken place and have proved faulty in this case, it may be that there are more deserving suspects of surveillance at the moment, but that would depend on the factors that were taken into consideration at the time. But at the same time, there always will be people who will get through, especially in a case like this, where it hasn't appeared to have required any prior preparation, or indeed any, if you like, co-conspirators that might have reported on him to the authorities. But nonetheless, of course, the fact that he was able to carry out this attack, that he was known to the security services, will be something of concern, and I'm sure they will want to look at this and see whether they could have improved their decision-making processes. Of course, key to that will be some kind of independent review, not the security services as we've seen in the UK, for example, reviewing their own performance and, surprisingly, of course, always coming out and saying that there was nothing more they could have done.
Charles, thanks for your thoughts. Charles Shoebridge, security analyst and former counter-terrorism intelligence officer.